So we're going to start this thing off talking about how we're collecting our data. So the packet that you guys were given in class, we're going to start right here on this page. It's talking about some of the different ways to gather data, or what's called our experimental design. So here, there's basically three ways to collect data. We have surveys. Basically, it's a questionnaire or something. Maybe it's on paper, maybe it's online. I'm sure a lot of us have had experience with this. But we're basically just asking questions to measure some kind of characteristic or attitude of a group of people. An observational study, here's where we're basing our data, or based on data, where we've not manipulated anything. We're basically looking at something after the fact. Something has occurred and we go back and we kind of look through the data and try to pull, whatever it is that we're interested in studying out of a set of data that basically already exists. Versus in an experiment where we're actually assigning groups and we're imposing some type of treatment. There's three big principles to any kind of experiment. We want to control the aspects that may have an effect on the treatment, maybe that are beyond what we're interested in measuring. So for example, in some kind of medical study, maybe they're worried about gender being an issue. Maybe females react differently than males, and so they try to control that somehow. The idea of randomization, we don't want people self-assigning their groups, right? If we're doing some kind of study on exercise and the effects of exercise versus sitting on a couch, well, if we let people self-select groups, people that tend to like to exercise would probably pick that group, and people that don't really want to exercise would pick that group, and we might not actually be able to see any kind of big difference in the groups because people are already doing what they're used to. And this idea of replication, the third big part of an experiment, basically we want to make sure we repeat our process over and over again. And think about any kind of medical study. It takes years to get things approved, where they're doing experiment after experiment after experiment, trial after trial after trial. They don't release their results and claim to have a cure for some disease after only one study. They replicate or repeat the process over and over again. So if we take a look in that packet we have here, a couple different things that we can try here, taking a look at. So part A, a random sample of 30 digital cameras is divided into these two groups. One group given a brand name battery, while the other group a generic. So they take pictures until the batteries run out and they compare the two groups. So since we have things being separated into two groups, what we're looking at here is an experiment. For part B, I don't think this is going to let me write, it's not. So for part B, using the SAT scores to predict a student's college success, there's some controversy over that. So a study was conducted. They examined the SAT and then the college GPA of about 105 students. So in other words, they're looking at something after the fact. So for part B, this would be a great example of an observational study. So right off the bat, between A and B, you can see in part A, the treatments that are being assigned are the type of battery. The researcher is physically moving things into two different groups. So they're separating the cameras into two groups, and then they're imposing some type of treatment, versus in B, no treatment's being assigned. They're just taking a look at data that has already been collected. So we move on to C. Before viewing a lecture, these students were given a summary of the instructor's prior teaching evaluations, and they were either rated charismatic or punitive. So either they're kind of going into this thing thinking it's a good instructor or a bad instructor. They then watched the same 20-minute lecture, and then following the lecture, the students answered 3 questions about the leadership qualities of that lecturer. So here, if we take a look right off the bat, the students were separated into 2 groups. Either they saw something charismatic or they saw something that said that the person was punitive or negative. So in other words, there's some type of treatment being imposed right away where they're being forced into one of 2 groups. So although they're getting a 3-question survey at the end of the lecture video, the fact that these people are being divided into 2 equal groups, or these 2 groups, we don't know if they're equal, apologies, the fact that there's a treatment imposed and there is a split with the groups, this would be an example, again, of an experiment. Part D, how much television is too much for kids? Parents answered a questionnaire about their children's age, characteristics, and then television viewing habits. That's pretty much a survey. That's a survey written all over it, right? It's talking about a questionnaire. There's no kind of treatments. There's no kind of observation of previously collected data. That's a survey in D. And then for Part E, a study investigated the impact of participating in a school garden program. Subjects, they had 326 grade students at 3 schools. 2 of the schools, they used garden-based learning activities. in the third school did not include a garden program. So then 2 questionnaires, garden, vegetable questionnaire, and then a taste test were given to assess the outcome. Again, here's the term questionnaire, which makes me lean toward a survey. I see that word. It's kind of a buzzword, if you will, for survey. However, we look at the beginning of this situation, and these groups are being divided again. There's one group that's doing the garden-based learning, one group that's not. So there's a treatment being imposed on the 2 different groups. So the fact that there are treatments and the fact that they are separating things into groups, that's an indication, again, Part E is another experiment.